Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the Democratic Alliance is warning against moving Eskom from the Department of Public Enterprises to the Energy Department. The party says this move is irrational and disastrous. ANC resolutions will see some state-owned entities moved away from the Public Enterprises Department. The DA's Public Enterprises Shadow Minister, Ghaleb Cachalia, joins me now to tell us why the party is against this move. Mr. Cachalia, good morning and thank you very much for your time. So you say this move would be disastrous, but what would be your response to those that would say today that stage 6 that we're now subjected to under Eskom's, under the Public Enterprises Ministry, is in itself disastrous?
Of course it's disastrous, but it's disastrous because we are in crisis mode and government hasn't recognized that we are in crisis mode. We are governed within the utility by cyanide attacks on the CEO, bomb threats on the COO, and various mafias, the coal, the cable, the construction mafias that hold the utility to ransom. Now, this has to be dealt with in a decisive way. It can't be business as usual, but to move it to energy would create serious conflicts of interest. There are financial implications, and you know, it's going from Peter to Paul, and Paul has an agenda second to none. Paul has done, in opinion, a deal, and he's now in payback mode.
Talk to us about these conflicts of interest that you believe Paul, in this instance, I believe you're talking about Minister Mantashe.
Yes. Well, you know, there's a conflict of interest. You can't be, you know, arbiter and executioner at the same time. You can't run a utility and set the tariffs and various other things that fall within your ambit as a result of the move. That's why we have NERSA, but NERSA is answerable or not answerable, is falls within the ambit of Mr. Mantashe's you know, what he deals with. So what we have there is serious conflicts of interest because and I'm not even speaking about the financial implications, what bondholders will say, what you know, when this happens, whether our covenant's going to be come into play, and they're going to say, you know, what about our money? Who is going to back our money? What is the what are we going to get back in terms of interest for in terms of what we've ponied up in terms of loans? How safe are these loans? All these things have to be considered. You can't just willy-nilly move something because someone owes you a political some political.
We'll get to the politics that you speak of, the allegations. We'll get to the politics. But if we confine ourselves now to these two portfolios, if we look at Minister Mantashe, he is in charge of our overall energy strategy and regulation. Many say there was some sort of a misalignment here where you had two ministers, where you were shifting blame between the two of them. But now you're going to centralize this and have one minister to put blame on.
Look, administratively and operationally to some extent, it makes sense. But in the current scenario, this is where the politics comes into play. It A, doesn't make sense. B, it doesn't make sense in terms of the conflicts. And C, it doesn't make sense in terms of the money and the implications for loans. So there are four very important factors here to consider, which I believe have been brushed over by the current government.
But then if we had to now look at the stage 6 we're currently under, many experts have said, yes, they're a bit apprehensive to say that if it were to move to the DMRE, it would then automatically mean we have less load shedding, it's not so frequent. But what they did say was that on the administrative side of things, it would work. But if we just confined ourselves now to the public enterprises portfolio, it's not performing. It's not performing, and some are even fearing the worst, that it is about to get worse, whether it's the ministry itself or Eskom. But if you speak of the many challenges, be it the sabotage, be it the poisoning of the CEO and other elements, nevertheless, there's been an opportunity, some say, for them to try and get a grip and fix these issues, but it seems nothing's working. We've got South Africans frustrated today.
Well, you're absolutely right when you say that nothing really is working and nothing particular has been done. Now, firstly, what is required is the acceptance that we have a crisis on our hands. Now, the only people who seem to understand that there's a crisis here are you and me, as it were, and business and everybody else who's affected. Government doesn't seem to understand that there's a crisis here, a crisis of singular proportion. And when you understand that it's a crisis here, and if stage 6 is not a crisis, then I don't know what a crisis is. Then, accepting that there's a crisis here, you have to move for particular measures that deal with the crisis. Now, we have said ad nauseum, ring-fence Eskom, declare a state of disaster, have an independent panel overseeing it, and then do what is necessary and bring in all the various measures to deal with it. The security measures, the National Security Act, the Key Points Act, free up the hand of the executives and protect them while they are doing what they need to do. This
security measures, apologies for interjecting, but on the security measures, we've got the SANDF there, and if we're talking about perhaps an independent panel, some would say, well, they've just shook up the board. They've got new board members, so really, to a certain extent, many could say there has been some sort of move that indicates they fully appreciate the crisis that we're all in.
What has the board done since it's been there? The board has sat and twiddled its thumb. I haven't heard one particular sentence coming out of the board in the midst of all of this that has happened. Nothing, zero, zip. The board has been silent. The board is absolutely useless in my opinion, and hamstrung particularly. Not that they are incompetent people, they are engineers and the like there, but what are they doing? They're dealing with governance, they're dealing with HR, they're dealing with business as usual. This is not business as usual. This requires serious moves that look at how to deal with a crisis. And a crisis is where we are at.
Then talk to us about the politics. You have a theory that what we're seeing now, or could possibly see, which is the move of Eskom to the ministry of Mr. Mantashe. In this instance, you're saying there were some political considerations that led to that decision being taken by the African National Congress to have him overseeing Eskom.
Well, if you connect the dots, as Minister Gordon is fond of saying, then that will lead you to believe, quite intelligently, I believe, that Mr. Mantashe, Mr. Godongwana, and Mr. Gungubele threw their weight behind, and their considerable weight, and I'm not talking about girth of stomach here, behind Mr. Ramaphosa to say, do not resign, we will ensure that you get a second term in office. Now, when these things are done, there's always a payback, and we are witnessing the payback. Now, this may not be done, this payback, in terms of the move immediately, and it may be shelved till after the election. I certainly hope so, because then the ANC will no longer be in power. But the fact that it's happening shows that the internal machinations and the internal factional fights and deals that are made to address that within the ANC, whatever they may be, are affecting how we live and what we do. Now, we're talking about an effect on the most important utility in this country, which is Eskom. It affects every aspect of our lives. It affects the economy, it affects how people live, it affects the security of our country, it affects our hospitals, it affects, you name it. It is the most important.
Now, Mr. Cachalia, if this theory Apologies for interjecting. If this theory were to be true, some could easily then ask what would be the benefit for Minister Mantashe in this instance, because you would then be inheriting or allowing for what has now become a headache to come into your portfolio.
Well, you're then given a free hand relatively within your ministry to do what you have said before you will do. You can, let's say you bring power ships to the party on a 20-year contract, and you pump in energy from that source. You do all sorts of things that ordinarily would not be possible and have been hampered by governance and various other issues within Eskom. And remember this, that Eskom was corporatized. What happens now? Does it move to Mr. Mantashe and does it get uncorporatized? What happens to governance then? If the governance falls away and he has a free hand to do things, it opens the door to considerable graft, and if you like, takes us back to the future. That is not a place where we want to be. It may, in the short term, alleviate things, but in the long term, it is a very bitter pill to swallow, and we will suffer as a result.